Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at a brand new vintage Graflex, which I usually bought from eBay. This is in immaculate condition, absolutely stunning. We'll just go through it in detail, and I'll also break it down and compare the key components to some of the other vintage 3-cells that I have, just to try to determine the exact kind of generations of them. So without further ado, obviously it came with a nice reflector dish, as a lot of these normally do, and a cable which these plug into the side sockets there. Okay, we'll put these aside and focus on what we're actually interested in. So this is a 3-cell vintage Graflex. We're just going to break it down and compare it to some of the other vintages that I have to try to determine the exact sort of models of them. I'll start by taking them apart. Undo the glass eye and the red button. The pilot light just fell out. It almost looks like it's intact. Really, really beautiful condition. There's barely any rust on it. I'll show you more in a minute, just as I undo it. Okay, so starting with the upper, you can see a really nice finish. Again, this is the usual chrome brushed, sorry, not chrome, it's the brushed finish. The chrome variety is extremely rare and is the earliest variant of the Folmers, and I very rarely see them. Usually what you'll find is this brushed finish. But it is a Folmer, and we could tell because, first of all, it's got smooth pins, and second of all, inside the bunny ears, the Graflex ink, which I'm going to grab from here. Oh, actually, no. I'm sorry, I don't have a Graflex ink top. I keep thinking my TFA's grab. It's not. All 4 of these. There's 3 others I have here on the side to compare. They're all Folmers. Sorry about that, but the inks have the. Do you see that divot there? In an ink, there'll be 4 of them. One on top, one on the bottom, and on the other side again, one on top, one on bottom. In these Folmers, you either get these like a divot on this side and another more like almost like a punched out rivet of some sort on the other side, or you get a single rivet like this. It's usually made of brass, and that can also help us to determine if it's an early or a late Folmer, and I believe this to be a late Folmer because of that feature in the bunny ears. This is my TFA one. It's exactly the same. Got a divot on one side and a punched out rivet on the other. The other 2 have that brass rivet inside. There. So I believe this to be a late Folmer. Upper, at least. I always thought that late Folmers have a more shiny beer tab rivet. This seems to be a bit more dull. But I think a lot of these parts were mixed and matched, so there aren't any hard and fast screws, I think. So it really looks very similar to this one, which this one is an early Folmer, I know that for sure. It looks a lot like it, whereas here, just to add confusion, this is a late Folmer, and the beer tab rivet is a lot more shiny. It's hard to tell on camera, but it definitely is a bit more of a machined, shinier finish than this one, which is more flat. So that part has confused me, but I think there aren't any really hard, fast and rules. I don't think all early Folmers have everything that I'm saying and all late Folmers have all the other features. I think there's a lot of overlap in between. But I believe this to be a later Folmer regardless, because of some other tells as well. Again, take what I say with a grain of salt, please. I do know enough about vintage Graflexes. I have, as you can see, quite a few of them myself. There's one more in there that I haven't brought out, but that I'm always learning. So we'll move on to the clamp. The clamp looks amazing. It's such a good finish. There's not a single spot of rust on this, and in fact, this was intended for, because it's got a Folmer pattern. That's accurate for the Dagobah build, Dagobah from ESP. But because it's in such good condition, I'm actually probably going to use the clamp on the A New Hope, because that one has a spot of rust, which isn't bad at all. But since the Dagobah has or all the ESB have a chrome tape covering this portion, the stamping, I might as well use this on the Dagobah and use that one that shows the stamping on the A New Hope. So I will mix and match myself. Anyway, sorry, I've sidetracked a bit. So go back to the clamp. We can tell obviously it's a vintage because we can trace a line from the square tabs over here, and it goes right to the X. Again here, a line here, pretty much lines up with the side of the G, and that's how we tell these are vintage clamps and not replicas. You can also tell by the shape and the finish of the lever, and by this small rusty rounded lever pin, which gives it away as an early Folmer clamp. An early Folmer. This is an ink clamp for comparison. You can see it is really machined and flat and thick, and it's almost perfectly round. You can tell it's been machined to look that way. So it definitely looks different. And the lever also, there are subtle differences in sort of the width and the shape. If you just follow that S curve around, you kind of see it's slightly different here. So over here, it's almost like that. Almost, not quite a right angle, but almost. Whereas over there, it's much more of it's a much softer curve, bend to the inside of the lever here. There's another variant of this lever where this post over here is almost square and not curved. That is one of the earliest variants. I haven't seen many of those. But yeah, this is still an early Folmer clamp. The late Folmer clamp will have something in between. Not quite as machined as the ink, but it is larger and flatter and rounder than this one. I haven't got any of those to show. For some reason, I always get early Folmer clamps or ink clamps. I myself have never got a late Folmer clamp. So yeah, that's a clamp. I'll just show you the other two I have just quickly. They're exactly the same. Rounded, rusty, with that S curve that you can see there, Folmer. There's the other one. Well, that one's covered with RPKs, so I can't really show you that, but you can see the curve underneath. This is a custom piece that's covering it for A New Hope. Okay, we'll move on. Obviously the lower, not much to say, but again, flawless. You can see the stamping nice and clear. Made by the Folmer Graflex Corp and Rochester, NY, USA, patent number 2310165. Only the Dagobah and the Ranch Saber, as far as we know, have this stamping, which is why I wanted to buy this Graflex, because I want to build a Dagobah to add to my collection. The ESB, or the regular ESB like Bespin, has the non-patent Folmer. So again, Rochester, but here it says New York rather than NY, USA, and it says made by the Folmer, I guess. Not sure what it says now. Let's try and work it out from the A New Hope. The A New Hope is also a Folmer non-patent. See here, made by the Folmer Graflex Corp. And then it'll say Rochester, NY, or New York, Rochester, NY, USA. Yeah. So that's my only patent Folmer, and that is accurate for Dagobah. We know that for a fact because the Dagobah lower was reused for the Ranch Saber, which exists till today in the Lucasfilm archives, or in the Ranch rather. Skywalker Ranch, that is, sorry. And so there are lots of reference pictures of it, and we can clearly see that it's a Folmer with patent. Whereas for some of these other ones, we're not really sure. It's largely speculative, but we know the one that falls into the snow, although that's a stunt saber, is a Folmer non-patent like that one. The rest of them we're not really sure. The TFA we know is an ink, because underneath we can see the letters RED. Not from here, sorry. Because that's the one that says manufactured instead of made by. And that's only on the inks. Okay, last but not least, the glass eye and the red button. Red button. So underneath you can see 6 notches. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or 6. Yeah, 6 I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that gives it away as a late Folmer. In comparison, I will show you an early Folmer. So on my New Hope, I have an early Folmer button. It's got 3 notches. If there are any distinguishing features from here, I wouldn't know about them. I know there's a super early Folmer, obviously with a thin band of knurling. That isn't really accurate for any of the lightsabers, any of the main sabers anyway. It's on one of the, again, the one that falls in the snow in Hoth. It's on one of the stunt sabers in A New Hope, but not one of the main ones. So this is an early Folmer, but there's an even earlier one, is what I'm saying. Again, Bespin. I've got one of each on here. This is a late one, like the one I just shown you, with 6 notches. That one is an early one with 3 notches. And finally, we have an ink. Just for a laugh, let's do it. The ink just has a single notch right there. Otherwise, you can't really tell. I mean, not easily anyway. Some experts can tell, but I know this is the only way I know how to tell apart like red buttons, is to take them off and count the notches underneath. Finally, we come to the glass eye. It's clearly a Folmer. So ink glass eyes look completely different. It's fairly easy to tell the two. Is it early or late? That is much harder to say. I think this might be a late because it's the lip here, or the rim, is a little bit wider than you would normally expect for an early Folmer, which is almost like barely a millimeter. I think my other one might be an early Folmer. So this is my right hand, is what I believe to be the early Folmer, and you can see there's, try to zoom in, you can almost see there's almost like a step. It's almost a sharp edge it is a little bit thinner. It is very subtle. Over here, it seems to be flatter, which makes it look wider. It's not, because I've measured them. It's not actually wider, but there's a little step. I hope you can see the difference between right and left. So I believe the one on the right is an earlier Folmer, and the one on the left is a later Folmer. And that is that for this one. Once again, I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you found it useful in some way, and as always, feel free to reach out with any questions or comments. I'll try to get back to you as best as I can, really. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.